bumblebees! My name is Lisa Christoffersen and I am here today to read you my story. The title is The Monkey's Wedding. It's a cute story that I'm about to share with you. Are you ready? In Africa, when the sun shines and it rains at the same time, that is what we call a monkey's wedding. On the outskirts of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, lives a little boy. His name is Charlie. Charlie lives with his mama and papa in a double-story house with a big garden where Charlie enjoys spending each moment running around outdoors, playing in the garden, always exploring, playing with the water sprinkler, which was meant to water the grass, playing with the doggies and getting dirty as only little boys know how to do best. One sunny day, Charlie's parents took him to spend the afternoon at a beautiful forest not far from where they lived. Charlie had only recently started to walk and eager to speed up his steps. He was so excited to be going on a little safari. The forest was alive. Birds were chirping, Sykes monkeys jumping from branch to branch, squirrels running across the paths in search of food, the fish eagle crying out for his partner, safari ants creating black trails of hundreds of busy ants trailing across the path, Egyptian geese flying in low, skidding on the dams, ibis birds screaming out to tell everybody that they too were present, the kites circling above the trees. Walking along the path in the forest, Charlie's parents, deep in conversation with each other, didn't realize for some time that when they turned around to check on Charlie, well, there was no Charlie. Charlie was nowhere to be seen. They looked at each other and asked, "Where has Charlie gone?" Well, Charlie had taken off on his own very first safari adventure. On this beautiful sunny day in the forest, it suddenly started to rain. A beautiful rainbow could be seen in the distance. As Charlie is wandering off in his own thoughts, he bumps into Mrs. Kima, who had been watching Charlie walk off by himself. Seeing his fascination with the energy and activity of the forest, Mrs. Kima, who was all dressed up in a long dress and a big hat that was adorned with flowers, went up to Charlie and asked, "Are you lost, little Toto?" Charlie replied, "Maybe." "Yes, I am actually lost." "What is your name?" Mrs. Kima asked. Charlie replied, and Mrs. Kima then introduced herself to Charlie. "I will call you Toto," which in Swahili means child. Charlie looked at Mrs. Kima and then asked her, "Why is the sun shining and now at the same time it's raining?" Mrs. Kima replied and said, "It's a very special day and a lucky day. When you experience sunshine and rain at the same time, we call it a monkey's wedding." "A monkey's wedding," said Charlie. "Yes, look up, Charlie. Do you see those white fluffy clouds up there? That is where the monkeys are celebrating today's wedding and showering all of us down here on earth with raindrops." "Charlie, would you like me to take you to the monkey's wedding?" asked Mrs. Kima. Charlie, being intrigued and curious, immediately said, "Yes, please." Off the two of them went. Walking along the path, they came across a tortoise. "Where are you going?" asked the tortoise. "We are off to the monkey's wedding," said Mrs. Kima. "I walk too slow," said the tortoise, "so I won't make the wedding, but you enjoy." Above in the branches, monkeys all dressed very smartly were jumping from branch to branch and from tree to tree, all heading in the direction of the monkey's wedding. Passing a dam, Charlie and Mrs. Kima met two Egyptian geese who were sunning themselves after swimming in the dam. "Where are you two off to?" they asked. "We are going to the monkey's wedding," said Mrs. Kima. "Ah," said Mama Goose, "no wonder we see the monkeys grooming and cleaning each other. They must be preparing for the monkey's wedding." Suddenly, two monkeys beautifully dressed with hats passed Charlie and Mrs. Kima, and the two geese said, "Hurry, hurry, otherwise you will miss the monkey's wedding." Mrs. Kima turned to Charlie, who had wandered off to the edge of the dam to talk to a frog. "Aren't you going to the monkey's wedding, Froggy?" asked Charlie. "No," croaked the frog. "A monkey's wedding is only for monkeys." "Well, I am going," said Charlie. "Lucky you," croaked Froggy and jumped into the dam. Mrs. Kima ran over to Charlie and said, "Come on, our ride is waiting." Charlie looked at Mrs. Keema and said, "What ride?" "Look over at the end of that field in the distance. Do you see the rainbow-colored balloon?" "Yes," replied Charlie. "That is our ride, a hot air balloon that will take us to the monkey's wedding." A crow flew down to Charlie and Mrs. Keema and said, "If you are going to the monkey's wedding, you better hurry up. The hot air balloon is preparing to take off." "Look out," shouted Mrs. Keema. "Siafu!" "What are siafu?" asked Charlie. "Safari ants," replied Mrs. Keema. Charlie was fascinated with the thick black trail of hundreds of little ants moving in one direction. "Have you ever heard of the saying, 'You have ants in your pants'?" asked Mrs. Keema. "No," replied Charlie. "That means that person cannot sit still. Not actual ants in your pants, but always when you see safari ants on a trail, take a big jump over them. It hurts if they bite you." Charlie did a big jump over them and was chuffed with himself. "Come along," said Mrs. Keema. A dik-dik jumped out of the bushes and ran across the path right in front of Charlie and Mrs. Keema. "Bambi!" shouted Charlie. "No, Charlie," said Mrs. Keema. "That is a dik-dik, one of the smallest antelopes in Africa. Now come along, Toto." Butterflies hovering over their heads as they're walking through the fields towards the hot air balloon, and suddenly a troop of monkeys, all dressed beautifully, wearing hats and bow ties, caught up with Charlie and Mrs. Keema, saying, "Hurry, hurry! We don't want to miss the monkey's wedding." Mrs. Keema grabbed Charlie's hand and said, "Let's run." Charlie couldn't stop laughing, holding Mrs. Keema's hand and running with a troop of monkeys that were all dressed up and wearing hats for the wedding. They reached the hot air balloon and climbed up the steps and into the basket of the balloon. The balloon pilot was Mr. Rabbit, who was wearing a navy blue pair of overalls and a cap. As the last monkey got into the basket, Mr. Rabbit said, "Are you all ready for takeoff?" "Yeah!" everybody responded. Turning up the gas, the basket lifted off the ground and started its journey up towards the clouds, heading to the monkey's wedding. "Look, a chameleon," said Charlie. "Where?" asked Mrs. Keema. "There in the corner of the basket," said Charlie. Mrs. Keema asked the chameleon what he was doing in the basket of the hot air balloon. The chameleon replied, "Well, I am the good luck charm to the bride and groom who are getting married today. I am going to shower the newlyweds with good luck." "Oh, how lovely," responded Mrs. Keema. Charlie was standing on his toes, hands on top of the basket, looking up, looking down, fascinated as the balloon climbed higher and higher. Arriving on cloud 9, very gently, Mr. Rabbit put the hot air balloon down. "Welcome to the monkey's wedding," said Mr. Rabbit. "Asante sana," replied everybody in the basket. "What does asante sana mean?" asked Charlie. "It means thank you very much in Swahili," replied Mrs. Keema. Charlie turned to Mr. Rabbit and said, "Asante sana." Mr. Rabbit smiled at Charlie and shook his hand and told him to have fun at the monkey's wedding. Arriving at the wedding, all the monkeys were smartly dressed and seated along a very beautiful decorated table, eating bananas and singing, celebrating the bride and groom who were seated at the head of the table, throwing cloud balls down to earth, which now become raindrops. Charlie joined in on the fun of making cloud balls and throwing through the clouds down to earth. The fun continued for some time. Charlie made many new friends and was having so much fun. Mrs. Keema came over to Charlie and said, "Toto, I hate to break up the fun, but it's time for us to go. I'm sure your parents must be wondering where you are." Charlie said bye to the bride and groom and to all his new friends, and together with Mrs. Keema and some other monkeys, they got back into the hot air balloon. Mr. Rabbit lit up the gas in the hot air balloon once again and took them gently through the clouds and landed down on the very same field where they took off. "Out you jump, Toto," said Mrs. Keema. Mr. Rabbit kindly helped Charlie to get out of the basket of the balloon, and as Charlie jumped out, he saw his mama and papa. Charlie waved to his parents, shouting, "Mama, Papa! Mama, Papa!" Charlie's parents ran towards him. His mama threw her arms around little Charlie and asked, "Where have you been, Charlie?" Charlie's papa said, "We were so worried when we couldn't find you." and as we were looking around the forest for you, we came to a dam. We asked a couple of Egyptian geese if they had seen you, and they told us you had gone with Mrs. Kima to the monkey's wedding. Yes, replied Charlie. My new friend Mrs. Kima invited me to the monkey's wedding up there. He pointed towards the clouds above. Charlie told his parents all about his adventure and about all the new friends he had made. See, it has stopped raining. The sun appeared from behind the clouds, and it had indeed stopped raining. The monkey's wedding was over. Charlie gave Mrs. Kima a big hug and thanked her very much, then took his parents' hands and headed back home. That night, Charlie dreamt about his adventure and about all the many new friends he had made. So if you enjoyed the story, The Monkey's Wedding, you can buy signed copies directly from me, Lisa at lisachristofersen.com. The price is only Kenya shillings 650. We deliver for free within Nairobi. We courier throughout Kenya. Pay bill number 360394. And if you'd like to hear more stories, follow us on Bumblebees Kenya. Make sure that your notifications are on and click on the subscribe button right below the screen where you're watching right now. Kwaheri, bumblebees!